Welcome, Sarah. It's lovely to have you here this evening to explore through northeast Italy. It's often perhaps that the more southern regions and places like Chianti get a bit more of a look in, particularly with what we often talk about most. But it's nice to give northeast Italy and its regions a bit of a spotlight too, and that's what we're currently doing, isn't it, at the
I
Society?
couldn't agree more. I think it's amazing because Northeast Italy is one of the biggest regions for us at the Wine Society in terms of our sales, because it's got some of those enormous sort of Italian bankers in it. I suspect, all of our members will have had a bottle of Pinot Grigio or a bottle of Prosecco at some time or another, a bottle of Soave, a bottle of Valpolicella, maybe some Amarone at Christmas. The Veneto, especially of the three subregions we'll look at, has some amazing high volume, hugely successful commercial wines. So the Northeast Italy has those, but it also seems to mean that it's quite easy to drift elsewhere and look at some of the other classic regions that perhaps take up more column inches. So things like Tuscany and Chianti Classico or Brunello, or into Piedmont and looking at Barolo and Barbaresco. And I'm sure that, just because these things are so interesting and newsworthy, so writable about, sometimes in the press, we might think that Etna, or the wines from Etna, have more relevance because they're being talked about all the time and everyone's very excited about the new and exciting things. But we sort of forget about the absolute stalwarts and everyday bankers that come from Northeast Italy, which I love.
Yeah.
Um, but I also must confess that this offer, getting a digital offer at the Wine Society, gave me absolute free rein to not only try and highlight some of the classics from this region, but to also buy some new things. So members, hopefully you've seen and have had a look at the offer and have had a look online, and seen that actually this region has been broadened out a little bit. There are a number of new suppliers, I think about half a dozen new producers that we're working with for this offer, a few new grape varieties that we've not listed more consistently over the past. So hopefully there's been something that everybody has been able to get into, whether it's fantastic Pinot Grigio and Prosecco and Soave and Amarone at that price, or whether it's trying a Rofosco for the first time, or just being delighted that finally the Wine Society has a Rofosco on its list. Perhaps that's the way around some people see it. But yeah, it's been a fun offer to buy for.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some wines in the lineup here that well, I say some, I think maybe two that I'm familiar with, and others that I'm not. So it's very exciting to get the chance to try them as well. And it looks like quite a few members have got some of the wines. Some have got the full six. I must admit, I did bring the office caravan home with me this evening, so I didn't have to open all six full bottles, but I could still have a little taste. So if you do want to share with us what you think of the wines as we're tasting through them, do use the chat as you already are. And if you've got any more specific questions, you can pop them in the chat, but just so that I don't miss them, you can also use the Q&A function and we can answer those through as we go. And if there's perhaps any that are a bit more general, I might keep them to the end or might just pepper them through.
Yeah, no. If questions are really burning, put them everywhere, and we'll
Yeah,
try and get
we'll
them
find
answered.
them.
It's a
Yeah,
very relaxed evening. I think Catherine and I have some which are a bit more formal, but tonight is trying six really fun wines and
so
chatting about
yeah,
Northeast Italy. So
fun
do feel
Monday
free to try and,
evening.
interrupt.
Lovely. So, Sarah, do you want to perhaps maybe start off with a little bit of a slight overview as to Northeast Italy, kind of where else that sort of covers and how
Yeah,
perhaps it really differs from some of the other more.
yeah, absolutely. So I guess, so as I sort of hinted to in the start, Northeast Italy is a really important commercial region for us, firstly. And that's broadly speaking down to the wines from the Veneto. So we're talking about three different regions within Northeast Italy. We're talking about Veneto, we're talking about Friuli, and we're talking about a region that has many names. We'll call it Alto Adige in this presentation, but it's also known as Trentino, it's known as Sud Tyrol. It's an area that I will often, on the wine label, it often says Dolomites, which of course are the Alps, but in Italy. So it becomes a region that has multiple names. So to avoid confusion, we'll try and stick with Alto Adige for this presentation. But the reason some of the names are different there is because the sort of the fluency of European borders over the history of winemaking. So over the many hundreds of years that wine has been made, Italy hasn't always existed. It's a relatively recent unified country in European standards. And of course, North Italy will have been part of the bit that was back and forth between Germany or Austria or Italy, or, the languages spoken in this neck of the woods cover German and Italian, as well as having some local dialects. The town names can often sound quite different to the names you might see in southern Italy or central Italy. And the family names, again, we're tasting Hofstätter later, which sounds more at home perhaps in Austria or Germany than it does in Italy and Italian history. Very different to the Veneto, which was always a sort of heart of the Medicis and heart of the kind of, sort of rise of Italian royal families or very prestigious families. It's been an amazing trading area. It's famous for the Po Valley River. It's where there's just huge opportunity for agriculture in general. Wine has always stuck, broadly speaking, to the lower hills within this region. We've also got the beautiful lakes in Veneto that influence the microclimates locally. And it's a real sort of trading area too, because if you're crossing the country, it's got the lovely ports of Venice and everything to the east on the Adriatic. You can quickly get up into the mountains and up into mainland Europe, or you can cross, or you can ship out of the Adriatic there. So it's always been a hub for trade and merchant sort of business. And those wines have benefited from that. So I spoke to these more commercial styles, and I'm sure that history of being linked to an area that has an amazing influence of merchants and trading, commercial acumen really helps give a style a sort of push forward. So if you're making a good product, it then is going to get taken up and shipped and exported and drunk locally as well, and then you'll make more of it, is the hope. So the towns also in Veneto are the bits that we should really talk about too, because we've got Verona and Venice. I hope that a number of you will have visited them. If not, please go. These are two of my favorite Italian towns or cities. Verona, of course, beautiful for its there's a wonderful arena in the center of Verona that is sort of an unfinished arena, and it sort of sets the style of the town, and of course famous for Romeo and Juliet being set there. So there's balconies galore that you can go and pretend, was the balcony in.
I have been. I've been to the Verona, one of the Verona balconies.
Just wonderful, and it's where the Italian and global wine trade meet every year. So the big show is held in Vinitaly every year, which is perhaps surprising, but again speaks to the sort of the dominance of Veneto and its commercial sense and merchant appeal. It's where Vinitaly is held, where thousands of wineries from across Italy all gather in Verona in an enormous complex of what look like airport hangars. To have is definitely not very romantic, but it's a fabulous trade fair with thousands of growers all congregating on Verona to show wines to both restaurants and sommeliers from Italy or agents from Italy, but also to buyers from around the world. And we all fly in every year for we nickname it the Casino of Vinitaly, which is a sort of Italian phrase for suggesting it's a bit of a riot. And Venice, of course, is the gorgeous other city connected to this region, and you'll sometimes see it on wine labels, as we will in this flight. The lagoon area of Venice is an important area, both culturally and historically, but also for wine growing. And the city is just, those of you who've been, I don't need to say anything, and it's just the most gorgeous city I've ever seen in my life. And I think everyone needs to get there before it sinks, because it's sinking. Get there quick. Book the holiday. Go to Venice. It's fabulous. Then we move on to the third region that we'll be looking at of the wines, which is Friuli, which is where Italy borders Croatia in that northeast section. It's an area that's dominated by really beautiful rolling hills. Relative altitude is sort of moderate compared to the Italian Alps or the Dolomites in Alto Adige. But it's definitely not a flat zone. It's rolling hills and a very beautiful area. The main town there is Trieste, which is again a super port town, great merchant history. And it's still, I think it's now benefiting because it's got a cruise port terminal, and now that you can't, or it's now much more difficult to take massive cruise ships into Venice for very good reason. Um, Although probably disappointing for those on the cruise. Trieste does much better because it's picking up lots of that cruise business, and you can park your big boats right in the center of town. So it's quite a sight. I was in Trieste when a enormous cruise ship was sort of at the bottom of the square, and it's quite a bizarre sight to see.
Yeah,
Um,
it is quite impressive, isn't it? It's like a floating city.
Amazing. It was sort of amazing and bizarre, and some people hate it, some people love it. I have to say, I think it's kind of fabulous. But yes, people can be on whichever side of that debate. But a lovely city in its own right, with a huge amount of history and culture, wonderful food, restaurants, great scene. But of course, linked much more to that eastern side of Europe, so to Croatia, to the history, to Slovenia, to all of those sorts of yeah, those states, and has that influence of the great varieties cross over the borders. We see food crossing over the borders. We see culture crossing over the borders. So much of this is just a recent construct.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, sometimes it's easy, or well, not easy, but last week we had our off the beaten track tastings, and you forget that these regions, so like Slovenia, like Croatia, they've been making wines similarly as the
Mm.
northeastern areas of Italy for years as well, and it is that kind of that crossover that you get, that
No. I
it's
saw in a really interesting documentary. I won't remember what, but somebody, I don't think it was what's his name, the fabulous American actor who's done lots for Italy. Oh man,
Stanley
Stanley Tucci. I
Cooch.
don't think it was a Tucci documentary. It was another predating it, but it was about how the sort of Slovenian and Croatian agriculture and winemaking got really interrupted by the sort of communist drive
Yeah.
to group everything and to make it centrally. And so it
Mm.
really took away from those kind of individual grape varieties and individual tomato varieties or individual aubergine varieties, or the various kind of vegetables and plants and produce that we make. And it was just such a huge loss, and it's now so wonderful that it's all on sort of return. When
Yeah,
you
there's
go
just
to
so
visit these
many.
places, you see them kind of pulling it back. But of course, what Italy has that's so phenomenal is that actually the Italians have been always so entrenched in their local pride. And I mean it in a really good sense, because often we talk about pride being, coming before a fall and being quite a horrid character trait. But the Italian local pride is something that has preserved so many wonderful things, and it's preserved difference. So each village, each region, each even competing farmers have decided that their clone or variety or a very specific piece of agriculture is the best. And there's no way that they would ever plant anything else because it wouldn't be good enough. And that's preserved these fantastic historical grape varieties, even in tiny volumes, so that they have sort of stood the test of time. They've not been entirely sort of commercial or dominated by commercial gain. So they haven't just replanted everything with the thing that's fun at the moment. It happens, of course, and there's Sauvignon Blanc planted across Italy and Chardonnay planted across Italy. Whether or not you like it or not is up to you. But on the whole, there have always been a lot of little pioneers who have kept their traditional grape going, and traditional vegetable or traditional wheat type or traditional rice type or traditional whatever it may be. And that patchwork is what makes so much of Italy interesting, and is also true of this neck of the woods. But it's in contrast to, when you're talking about Friuli, it's in contrast to the countries that neighbor it, who've been coming back to Friuli and seeing what they can bring back recently.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to actually be able to taste that history through the wines, and to taste that the the heritage, really, the
Mm.
fact that you've got these varieties that have stood the test of time, and
Yeah.
they are still being championed by those producers.
Yeah,
It's
and
that's
they go in and out of favor. I'm speaking to varieties from Piedmont. There's Nebbiolo is, of course, huge and incredibly famous at the moment, and Barolo and Barbaresco are wonderful, wonderful wines. But we also often taste Pelaverga and Fraser, who are, great varieties that are much less well planted and much less well known internationally. And we always sort of, the wine trade, the wine trade often talk about Fraser being the slightly sort of rustic uncle of Nebbiolo. But with climate change, with development over the next, wine is a long-term business. So over the next 200-300 years, will Fraser have its day again? Or will it come back? Or Pelaverga, this lighter style, much spicier, will it come outside of Verduno and start to come across Barolo as demand grows for those styles of crunchier wines? We'll see. And I think it's sort of interesting to see these incredibly specific and very characterful native grape varieties, and how they may or may not be, go through natural fluxes of the years or centuries, perhaps.
And I think characterful is that linking descriptor for
Yeah,
them, isn't it? It's that they are different characters, but they are the characters in their wine show. It's
absolutely.
yeah,
And I think this pair of first white wines, without jumping ahead, start to show that. So I think
yeah,
I started buying wine as a career in 2008. So we're talking 18 years now. And I bought Italy from day one. So I've always been really involved in buying Italian wine. And I think I'll have been to 16 or 17 Vinitalis this year. So it's a big part of my working career. But what's really exciting is that the wines have improved just in that period. So
yeah,
although 18 years might feel like quite a long time for me, and I have no idea where the time has gone, it is of course only a short period of time in agriculture in real terms. But the improvements in winemaking, especially for white wines, although definitely also for red, but over the last 20 years has been astonishing. And that has enabled us to actually see the real characterful differences between these grape varieties. So I think when I first started buying Italian wine, when I was blind tasting, so I also got involved in that very early, we would describe Italian wines if we thought it was sort of medium acid, medium body, lemony flavors, a bit moderate in all degrees, and we didn't quite know what it was, so lumped into Italy. And then it was a sort of like, Suave is exactly, or Garganega, the grape variety, is exactly the same as Fiano, is exactly the same as wherever. And we just pick a white grape from Italy. It was sort of done arbitrarily, which is such a shame. And now is such a nonsense. Because now, when I'm back, now I'm involved in teaching the MW rather than studying for it, but back teaching it, we expect students to be able to pick out lots of different classic whites from Italy and really see it. And I think we can only do that, and we can only explain that change in such a recent or short period of time because of the winemaking. So investments have been made. Wineries have invested in mostly in really good stainless steel tanks and refrigeration.
yeah,
So
yeah.
actually managing, and then they've invested in harvest by all means and getting it in on time and not too hot and not allowing the grapes to oxidize before. And it's the skills of the winemaker that they've learned. These winemakers are the generation that have traveled, have seen other people do it, have seen the rise of Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand that happened, of course, before that. New Zealand Sauvignon from Tally Bay was kicking off while I was still a student at university and not even thinking about the wine trade. So they've seen it, and they've seen these examples of how you can really impact how your wine tastes. And that's been a wonderful discovery, because we've suddenly started to see what these grapes really taste like, rather than seeing slightly oxidized, slightly generically made wines that just create a white wine at the end that's a bit bland.
So on the subject of tasting, shall we go on for
Yes.
wine number one?
And wine number one, because I'm sure I know that you've pre-prepared some maps, and we should definitely show
I
them to
do.
members. And wine number one is from the Veneto, so we can look at that. Look at that.
So this is the one we're on. So it's the Laris. Um, so I have my board
Yes.
and I'm
So
going
I
to get the lap.
love that this pair too is also quite approachable in terms of price point.
Yes.
There is still fantastic value from all of Italy and from Northeast Italy as well.
Yeah, that quality value ratio is very on point for this part of
Yeah.
Italy, I feel, having looking at the wines that we've got.
And if any of you, like I, have both bottles, do get a second glass. Please, please, for me, get up from your sofas or computers and go and get a second glass and pour both if you've got both. Because comparing wines is how you spot what's different. That's the trick to this game. So yes, so the map we've got here showing Veneto. I think the map in the top right hand corner gives the sort of size of Veneto really, and the placement of it. So we're talking about this northeast corner, and we're only really talking about the three regions that are almost in line with Veneto's edge, heading up to the mountains, and then the corner that's grayed out that leads to the border. You can see where Venice is on this map on the Adriatic Sea. And these grapes are, or this wine is designated as a Della Venezia IGT, which means that the grapes must have come from the regions closest to Venice, but not a specific sub-region of that's marked out here. This is made from Ribolla Gaia. Ribolla Gaia is a great variety that we actually listed at the Wine Society first under the Bin series a number of years ago. So about 5-6 years ago, we listed a Bin series Ribolla Gaia from a different producer, which sold very well and has been relisted since under their own producer name, mainly because this is such a charming and often great value wine. Yeah, I'm just getting lots of citrus flavors, but a lot of floral notes as well. I don't know.
There's a little of that sort of where it's been a little bit warmer today in the last couple of days, when leaving the office and you can kind of smell a little bit of the blossom on the air. It's that soft floral to me that is also
Yeah,
still a little bit citrusy, almost sort of
yeah,
honeysuckly.
yeah. Honeysuckly, citrus, very nice sort of blossom, but it's got a nice, pretty perfume. I think
Yeah.
the intensity of this wine is slightly higher on the palate, and it's got lovely fresh acidity. So the Italian whites for me have some characteristics that run through many of them, but one of them is very much the drinkability, and it sounds ridiculous, but there is something really lovely about a well-judged, balanced, dry, crisp white wine that makes you want to have another glass. And sometimes you
Absolutely.
get white wines with too much residual sugar or not enough acidity or a slightly oily texture that isn't quite as drinkable. And that's very rare for Italy. Italy
Yeah.
produces a lot of these characterful in different ways, but fresh, bright, dry,
Mm.
cleanly made now white wines. So this is no oak. It's fermented to dry. It is a lovely by the glass, easy to enjoy wine that doesn't necessarily have to have food.
No,
Yeah,
I think that's perfect. That if you were going to say, if someone came round and you offered them a drink and they're like, "Oh, I'd love a glass of white wine," and you poured them that, I think, you know, if they were disappointed with that, they should leave. I think that's a delicious wine.
it's definitely a wine that is really difficult to dislike, I think.
Yes.
There are some wines that are much more marmitey, and we have some
Yeah.
of them in the reds that people will love or hate and have more of a sort of opinion on. And I mean it in a very positive way that this is actually more of a catch-all. This is
Yeah.
this is a white wine that most people, by and large, enjoy. I'm sure potentially on the questions, I'm not following it, but we've probably got somebody being like, I hate this wine immediately.
Well, no, it sounds, I mean, it looked like there were some people that had actually they'd already drunk the whites over the weekend, so I'm hoping that
Great.
that is a bonus. I think as well, it's one of those ones that, yes, it's got high acid because it's nice and refreshing. Yes, it's, got those citrus flavors, but it's still got some lovely ripeness to the fruit as well. It's not one it's not like a sharp wine. It's all very nicely balanced and
Oh,
refreshing rather than
yeah.
kind of stripping.
No, it's crying out for the weather to continue to improve.
Yes,
If we
definitely.
could all just, get our dances out or various prayers and
Yeah.
the sun come out
Get
for
that
spring
sun.
would be great. Because yes, this is the kind of wine where really we want the sun to be shining, there to be optional olives, and
Yeah.
to just enjoy very cold from the fridge. Because as it warms up, that perfume really starts to come through. And I always like that in the transition of a glass of white wine. So from the
Mhm.
beginning to the end of a glass of white wine, just because of the heat of your own hand, it's always a bit smellier at the end, and that's always kind of lovely.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, definitely. And I think, dare I say, if you've got anyone, members that are perhaps huge supporters of Pinot Grigio, not that there's anything wrong with
Yeah,
that. But if they're wanting perhaps to kind of explore something that is still within that comfort zone of a crisp, refreshing wine, but is something a little bit different, then I think this and also on price point is still very approachable and
yeah.
comparable, then this would be a lovely alternative.
No, no. I think you'll, I hope, never hear me. And I now do more of these online things than I'd ever like to. And I hate that they are they're
They're
living forever
forever
on
on the
YouTube.
internet.
Because I'm bound to say something silly and be caught out at some point. But I hope you'll never hear me be disparaging towards Pinot Grigio, because I love it and I drink quite a lot of
Yeah,
it. Especially the ones I buy for the Wine Society. And I think in this offer, we've got a new Pinot Grigio, which is exceptional because it's a bit more oyster shell note, and it's a little bit more contained.
yeah,
I also think I grew up in that phase of Pinot Grigio being incredibly popular and then a little bit over popular. And we always like to bash something that's been successful. But also, of course, as things grow in success, they often do lose quality because people demand it a little bit cheaper, but also in higher volume, and everyone has to make some cuts and compromises. So they can go hand in hand.
mm,
But if you enjoy Pinot Grigio and have enjoyed it for many years, as I have, and potentially also the same is true of Soave, which was, I think, the big sort of blockbuster before Pinot Grigio was famous, and Frascati before that from the Roman
yeah,
hills. All of these wines have something in common, which is that they are this lovely drinkable style of crisp, dry wine that doesn't that has lots of character, but doesn't demand your full attention. Like,
yes,
there are some wines that you enter a room and you know that somebody in the corner has got a glass of Gewurz or Sauvignon Blanc from Marlborough, or Viognier or something something
yeah,
really showy, and that's fabulous on some days, and you really want that sometimes. But it's not what you want always, and sometimes you want a wine that is just going to sit in its right place and make the evening just more charming.
absolutely, yeah.
But
And
that's I
this
think
does
this
that.
first wine, a more
Yeah,
charming evening is this wine.
yeah, definitely.
Now, the second one by comparison, so they're not, we're not talking a long way apart. So this is from Friuli, so we've moved slightly further east, and it's made from a grape variety called Friulano, named after the region. We've talked a little bit to Sauvignon, and there's an idea that well, this is known as Sauvignon Vert elsewhere. It's also has been called Tokai Friulano, so you might also
Oh,
see it as
wow.
Tokai. So it's got some. It's not connected to the Hungarian Tokai,
Okay.
but in Chile it was mistaken for Sauvignon Blanc for quite a long time. So it's Sauvignon Vert rather than that. But it's so this grape has a few names and a few confusions, but Friulano is what it's been called for, at least from Italy, for a long time now. And they've dropped the Tokai Friulano from the name entirely because of the confusion it was causing. This example, though, does have a little bit more acidity than the last. So relative to Ribolla Gaia, I think it now I've put Sauvignon in your mind, you might see that too. And it sort of does have that slightly more lifted. If the last was sort of more orange blossom and orangey citrusy flavors, this is more of those
Mm.
lemons and green gage and some of those slightly more fresh green citrus flavors, limes and things like that, um, which I really love. And again, I was saying that generally speaking, because these regions are really quite big agricultural regions, they grow a lot of different products. The grapes have always been pushed into the hills because it's harder to farm and lots of products can't be farmed on hills. But
Mm.
in Friuli, that's really true because these are all up on beautiful rolling hills, and have to be carefully managed. the winery actually is the same winery for both of the first two, called Cardarajo, and they're a big winery who are quite famous for their prosecco. It's still owned by three brothers. It's a family business, sort of set up in the 1930s. But these are two of their wines that they're making outside of their perhaps comfort zone, which was prosecco. And they're both new listings for the Wine Society. I've been tasting them over the last 2 or 3 vintages. And I thought in the 2025, they've made a fantastic job of both wines. So I'm delighted that both have come in on time.
Yeah.
Getting, oh gosh, getting wine. Sorry, I've got a little video going off. I'm sitting in my husband's study and he has one of those. This is probably too much information for everyone, but he's got one of those photo frames that pulls photos across. And it's got onto a small film of my daughter, but very appropriate film, but a bit surprising. But no, these two are both from the 2025 vintage, which of course was only picked back in sort of August and September for these.
Yeah.
So to get them through fermentation, fully dry, to allow them to have a little bit of time on the lees, which usually adds a little bit of richness, and then bottled and shipped to the UK in time to sell at the very beginning of March, or actually at the end of February when this offer went live, has been tricky. And I knew I was setting my team up for a tricky logistical position, but I really think that these young, less expensive wines from this area are best fresh. So I always try and challenge everyone around me, who probably hate me for this, but to try and get as many 2025s in as possible, as quickly as possible, and try and move through. It's not that the 2024s are now tired. They obviously, these white wines are brilliantly made and well bottled, so they can last 2 or 3 years happily in somebody's home or on a wine rack. I just happen to really love that immediate zestiness that comes with the freshness. So both of these coming from the 2025 vintage, which actually is now starting to be really talked about in quite positive terms. So across Europe, we're seeing very relaxed winemakers who suddenly have realized they've got good wine in their cellar.
Yeah,
They've got something lovely to sell. 2024, for different reasons, was fairly tricky across different regions and different countries of Europe. And 2025 was a much more relaxed and classic vintage.
It was still
Exceptional
fairly
soil side.
warm, wasn't it, though, as a, so has that,
I think we're getting used to fairly warm.
well, yeah.
And it came with rain the year before, so it wasn't quite as drought ridden, or the
Yeah.
risk wasn't so high. But yes, we're the world is getting used to warmer vintages.
Yeah. It's
There are
got a
no
lovely,
climate deniers in agriculture.
well, you just can't. It proves this for itself, isn't it, that it's happening. But I think it's, for me, I think I prefer this one slightly more over the first, simply because it has a little more of that sort of savoury lick at the end. Is that more from the lees stirring, or is that from the grape varieties, or just like by its nature?
I think it's really hard to tell where one thing stops and another starts in terms of what impacts the flavor of a wine. But I think I agree with you. The second wine is more a little bit more savory. The first was more floral and immediately fruity. This is a little bit more high acid green fruit, but with that minerality coming through as well.
Yeah.
I think that's probably more the grape in this instance, because they've both been made incredibly similarly. And they would have been picked at very similar yields and all those sorts of things. And both have been rushed in inverted commas for my order that I sort of put in early. So neither have had a really extended period on these. So I think it's probably the grape in this instance.
Yeah. Perfect. I mean, I've got a cauliflower cheese for dinner after this, and I'm thinking that's gonna actually go really nicely.
That could go very well. Oh gosh, I wish I knew what was for dinner later. I'm having the foggiest until I look into the fridge.
Only because it's leftovers.
Yeah, I'm not organized enough.
No, that is delicious, and it is lovely to try them together, even though then not necessarily sort of like a like for like pair. You wouldn't have them as a duo, but to the fact that they are from the same producer, same year, it is nice to kind of see that difference. And I always find it so helpful in general to be able to try, you know, the best way to understand the differences in wines is to taste them side by side, so you can
Absolutely.
actually have that point of reference
It's sort of like when
in
you
the
try anything
immediate.
in isolation. Like if you,
Yeah,
like I'm sure this is a crazy example, but I think go with me. So if you were somebody who was a chef and making fantastic pizzas, if you try just one brilliant pizza somewhere, you can think it's fabulous, and you can try another brilliant pizza another day and also think it's fabulous. To really know which one is better, you need to
you
have
have to
both
have them.
pizzas
Yeah,
really
absolutely.
close together because our memory on taste is quite short. And
Yeah,
then understanding the detail and understanding the differences and the similarities and the whatever. And the same is absolutely true of wine. So if we had these, one bottle tonight and one bottle tomorrow, or possibly more responsibly, one bottle tonight and another bottle on Wednesday over many days and many people and whatever it may be to be responsible in your world, we would forget what the first
yeah.
one tasted like, and we would think, well, both were crisp and both were dry and both had some of this citrus flavor, and so they were quite similar. um,
Mm.
and they are quite similar. They do have those in common, but they are also showing their individuality. And that's the fun of wine. Like that's why I love buying from Italy. I love having those differences all the time. I get very bored of drinking the same thing again and again.
Yeah,
And Italy and its patchwork and its local pride and all of those things that have preserved this incredible array of great varieties and styles really lends itself to keeping me interested.
absolutely.
I've
It's
always,
definitely, I always, whenever I'm tasting Italian wines, I always think, why don't I buy and, why don't I buy more Italian? And
yeah,
that's slightly kind of sacrilegious to say to you, Sarah, but it's like, why don't I buy more Italian? Because there's so many that I love, and there's so many wines. And I think even like, as myself, I get very easily swayed into thinking it's all Chianti or it's all Barolo and Barbaresco. And I'm like, maybe that's not what I'm in the mood for. But actually, Northeast Italy serves me very well.
yeah. No, it's I think we all get into well, we all really like the things we like. And
Yes,
so
I
once you've
agree.
discovered the things
Yeah.
you like, it's very tempting to just stick with it. And where we care more and less is where we make the changes. So where I care less about some things, I might stick with it forever
Yeah.
because I'm not that bothered and I'm not that invested to try many things around it. I don't know, like barbecue sauces or something, hot sauces, whatever those, some people go crazy for those sorts of condiments or whatever. Will try everything and have their favorites and make different choices all the time. I will pick one and stick with it forever that happens to be on offer in Ocado. But the, the kind of wine side for me is the opposite. So I really care about it. So I really want to try all the different things and keep it going. But I'm often confronted by friends, because you must get this too, that we mostly just get text messages from our friends saying, what should I buy, either from the Wine
Yeah.
Society, which is
Yeah.
of course lovely, and I'm very glad that they're doing
Or
that,
pictures of wine lists if they're
or
out at
pictures of
a
wine
restaurant.
lists saying, or pictures of other competitors, shop shelves full of wine saying, what should I buy? But I really hope that, and Italy is complicated, and I know why I'm asked. But my job entirely is to try and pick wines that I would really drink.
Yeah.
And to make sure that if you're buying an Italian bottle from the Wine Society's list, like that I would really enjoy it. And I
Yeah.
drink a lot of Italian wine, and this is my job and my profession. So whether or not I am any good at it is up to the consumer to decide, or the member to decide. But I've made that call, so I've triaged it, and I've tried to put forward only wines that I really actually believe in and like and drink.
Mm,
These are two of them. I've not shipped them in other vintages. I really like their 25s. I've shipped them. I think members should drink them. These are lovely.
definitely. And it looks like that members are very much enjoying them. I think personally, I would quite like to move on to a red because
Yeah,
I had a little smell of it earlier and it smells delicious.
we're
Which is
going with
Dinotte.
Dinotte.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, great.
Yes, the Dinotte.
Double checking.
There we go.
So we now have a pair of wines from Alto Adige, both of which I think say Dolomite somewhere on the label. Yes, they do.
Yes.
Or Dolomiti. So the Italian Alps. And these are both made by Mezzocorona. So we had a pair from one winery, and this is a pair from another. So a nice pair to have. And again, I think both of these wines are a relatively good price point. I think you've just had the slide up, and I managed not to notice precisely what Dinotte was, but I'm sure you've got.
I will. I will tell you.
But no, I think this is where we start to get to very different grape varieties and very different styles. We're going to see two very different styles from the same producer with an overlapping grape variety here.
So the Dinotte is £9.50. So less than a tenner. It's just,
yeah. So this, and I think 13% is quite, it's terrible to say, but it's quite moderate in the current wine sort of world. And for the richness that you're getting here, I think that's slightly surprising for me. I think it's quite a moderate ABV. But this is based on Teraldigo, which is one of the major grape varieties for this neck of the woods, and with some Marzemino blended in. It's also had some oak aging, so you're getting some of that vanilla character from the oak. Teraldigo tends to have, at least for me, a kind of quite dark berry and wild kind of note to it, which I really enjoy.
Yeah, it's that lovely dark, sort of dark berry, dark cherry, slightly vanilla-y, but like true vanilla spice, like spicy vanilla.
And so the producer, Mezzocorona here, is one of the bigger cooperatives in this neck of the woods, but this area, so Alto Adige, is famous for having multiple cooperatives. They're at a very high standard, and it's explained pretty much by the shape of the landscape. So we're now up in the mountains. We're really talking about mountain wines. It's got Dolomites written on the label, which is the Italian for the Alps here. And mountainous wines tend to come from small plots. So if you think about just the absolute logistics of planting vines on an area, you just don't get as many vines per hectare on a mountain site, because you're up and down hills. You've got to put in terraces potentially. You've got to avoid, enormous outcrops of rock in half of it, or various different things that you're working to, and that means that on the average size of a piece of land that an Italian may own, they're going to have fewer grapevines, and they're going to also have fewer bits of other things and other agriculture that's going on to make that land profitable. And that means that it's really helpful to be able to sell your grapes to the local cooperative, because you don't actually have enough grapes to make something commercially viable yourself and to get that to market. So in this neck of the woods and in this mountainous region, for those reasons, there are a lot of cooperatives buying from lots of little independent growers. And Mezzocorona, as I say, one of the bigger. So they've got over 1,000 different members who sell the grapes into the cooperative under contract. And what sort of makes it really interesting is those relationships, because we often talk to small wineries who own all their grapes and are in the vineyards every day checking the leaves and all the rest. And in this scenario, it's much harder. And they suggest that there's sort of up to 600 hours of labor per hectare of vines in this neck of the woods, which is a very high input. And Mezzocorona probably go beyond that, because they're very high on their sustainability credentials. So they've asked all of their members to raise their game and to really pull away from using chemical fertilizers or insecticides, all those sorts of things, and to create wines of real sustainability. And so it's fascinating to kind of hear the stories and understand the kind of back and forth between the Growers Association and the representatives of the growers, the winemaking team, and then the very large agricultural team that are based at the winery, and that go out to all of the members to inspect the grapes and to suggest possible options if there are issues over the season in terms of growing. So if it's too hot or too cold or too wet or too rainy, or all those sorts of things. And they will have a real day-to-day interaction across a very large region that is difficult to navigate because, of course, mountainous regions are not famous for their
Yeah.
incredible motorways.
Yeah.
So people put in amazing amounts of time and commitment to make sure that these wines look good. But because it's a cooperative and it's working at a bigger scale, it can also still deliver value,
Mm,
which is really impressive. And they've built a really impressive winery that makes the sort of process of making wine much easier. Because when you've got the facility available, it's half the job done. You can really make your life so much easier. And so for a long while, the Wine Society has partnered with Mezza Corona because we find their wines offer wonderful quality in a company that shares many of our values around sustainability, but also delivers great value. And here is a wine that really sort of speaks to that. It's quite recent to their collection. They have put it together because they have recognized that the market enjoys these slightly fuller, richer wines with a little bit of oak, but not too much, but mostly dry red wine that goes very well with food. And they've sort of created that using their local grape varieties, which for me is very impressive.
mm. I think it's lovely as well. Like looking at even though they're both Mezza Corona, you know, just the difference in the kind of the labeling. You've got very
Mhm.
traditional, but I said very traditional, more traditional, and then because you've got the togetherness of
Yeah.
people working. It's just nice to see that so illustrated so
Yeah.
clearly, and also
I know.
just the sustainably farmed to just have that front and center, you know,
Well,
yeah,
and to give everybody a clue that it's rich and smooth. Like I know that this can
yeah,
sound daft, but it is actually just very well put together and clear about what this is.
yeah,
And that doesn't take away from anything. If anything, it just adds to the ease at which we can enjoy these wines.
yeah, and then sometimes actually, you know, that's really helpful
Yes.
for if you're just wanting to choose a wine. You want to know what it tastes like. It's going to be rich and smooth. That sounds lovely. Bob on, you can just crack on
Yeah.
and get it open. But yeah,
I know.
it's great. It's for a Monday night red, it's delicious. Mm.
So it's done very well in our champs tastings in the past. Excuse me. Yeah, it's done very well in champs in the past because it is incredibly balanced for such
Yeah,
a full style. Yeah, it's ticking so many boxes.
yeah. And still lovely and has lovely freshness.
Mm. And I think let me pour the other to be sure. And Dinotte for me, why we put it first, or I should say Catherine put it first, but with absolute correctness,
And approval. Just
is that relative to the second wine, it may be quite full and quite soft and juicy and
Mm.
have that bit of oak, but it is still a wine that you could drink on its own.
Yeah.
Latte. It's a full wine. I wouldn't recommend drinking the whole bottle, a single as on your own, but only because of responsible drinking. Suggests I shouldn't. But but it is a really enjoyable wine without food.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think I don't think that you have to go to town pairing this with something that you cooked for 10 hours. It could be enjoyed while you're cooking. And then of course it will also work well with food because it is a fuller bodied style. So it's not going to get lost in any way, shape, or form. But it is gentle. The second wine, I think this is when Italy starts to get to the point where you need to add some food.
Yeah. No,
Because
it's
Nerofino,
lovely.
and I think that also is the slight change that they're indicating through their labels at Mezza Corona. So with the slightly more traditional label, the slightly more plain presentation, is talking to a wine that is a bit more traditional.
Yeah.
So the blend of Tarrago here and Lagrein is slightly more commonly found across the region. It's also had a little bit of oak, but the oak is older oak, only for a short amount of time. so it's not as prominent on the taste profile. And here the acidity is brighter. So I think
Mm.
it's more of that very kind of Italian red cherry note. I said earlier that for me, Tarrago has often those sort of darker black fruits, and I think that they're still here, but the Lagrein is more of that cherry note and is coming through quite clearly on the nose for me.
But still, as well, it really is that quality to value ratio. This is 10.95.
Yeah.
It's a very sophisticated wine.
Yes. But I think if you were to compare Tarrago and Lagrein, I think most people would see that Tarrago is a bit more approachable. It's a bit softer. It's a bit fuller. Um, it's a bit more gentle.
Mm.
Lagrein has a bit more acidity to it. It's a bit more attack, and can have a bit more of that character. And I think that's what we're seeing in this blend. So we're seeing that nice balance of the two. It's a wine actually that I drink a lot at home. It's one that's on repeat order because it's a really again we were talking about it with the whites, but it's a really drinkable red. And I
Mm.
usually drink I usually enjoy most of my wine with food, so I don't often drink without, but that's perhaps just because I probably eat too much. But I'm always able to find the excuse to pair wines with food. But I often don't know what I'm having for dinner. So as I
Mm.
illustrated earlier, I genuinely will have to check what's going off first in the fridge. Like I have an idea. I did the shopping, but I'm going to have to see what's going off and then cook something this evening. Um, and I've probably opened the wine often before I've worked that decision out. And this is
Yeah.
one of those reds that can be paired with so much.
Yeah.
Um, because of that lovely bright acidity, because it's got some Italian tannins, that aren't, they're not hitting up Nebbiolo or Sangiovese yet, but they're relatively grippy, so they've got something to work with when you're looking at food choices. Yeah, this is a wine that I go to a lot, whereas Dinotte is more of a hug.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is, and I think there's not many times that I need a wine to be more of a hug, but this is a bit more of a call to action. Like,
Yeah.
crack on with the cooking, Sarah. Both from the same vintage. They're both from 2022. So both of these wines have now had 4 years, which speaks to the fact that they've been oak aged in some, in some degree, differing here, but they've also been allowed to have that time to bottle age as well, so that they're really ready to drink now on release.
Mm. Delicious. I really enjoy it. And I think, um, yeah, it's so nice to have the Castel Firmian for me. I think it's so nice to have a um, Italian red that does have that tannic structure without being so much tannin.
Yeah.
I find,
Yeah,
Nebbiolo,
yeah, yeah.
I find I really have to almost prepare myself for it sometimes.
No, no. There's
Whereas
definitely
this,
some
it's to
Italian
have,
tannins that are a bit of a worry. Well, not
yeah,
a bit of a worry, but a bit of a shock.
yeah. And you
It can
have
be
that
a great shock,
structure,
but no,
but
no, this is very much on the side of, still enjoy a glass very easily, enjoy the bottle, like
yeah,
don't worry too much. But it
yeah,
just means that it will be better at balancing out some food. So the
yeah,
moment we have proteins in our mouth, so cheese, dairy, um, meat, it's they chemically react with the wine. So the moment there are tannins
yeah,
with proteins, the tannins change and the feel of the wine actually changes in your mouth, which is why it's so much fun.
yeah, definitely.
I've just opened the next bottle, Catherine,
Oh,
while we're talking about Lagrein. So if you're tasting along with many bottles as I am, please do just tip out the Dinotte and leave the Nerofino in your glass so you can see the difference between the Lagrein blended and a Lagrein straight.
oh,
Because we are staying in Alto Adige for this, because this was part of our sort of more explore case. So we had a classics of Northeast Italy and a more explore Northeast Italy option within our digital offer. And so we were trying to pull out some of the wines that are a little less well trodden. And the straight Lagrein from Hofstätter, although a producer we've worked with for many years now, and one we really value is probably one that sells less volume because it's a little bit obscure.
Mhm.
And I hope that this gives an opportunity for somebody to taste something new. I am, talking to previously I was saying with the last that Lagrein is perhaps the more acidic, a little bit more um, uh, you know, not serious. Serious is the wrong word because it conveys that Tarrago isn't, but Tarrago is delicious, and the grind might be also delicious, but a bit more angular or a bit more uh, characterful, perhaps is the right
Yeah.
word, but a bit more uniquely Italian. Or it speaks to what I think of Italian. So it's got those cherry notes, it's got those sour blackcurrant notes, it's
Yeah.
got more acidity, it's got slightly firmer tannins. And of course, we're talking to mountains. So when you drink these wines, please think of the place that they've come from, because I always think you start to, what do you do? The local environment impacts the wine. So when we talk about Southern Rhone, we often talk about Grieg. When we talk about, Australian wines, we talk about eucalyptus. And it's because these herbs and plants are emitting oils and they are
Mhm.
getting into the grapes or onto the grapes and are getting into the wine. And so when you're talking about mountain wines, if you're smelling alpine herbs, that's not a surprise.
Yeah.
And I think this has some of that herbal,
Yeah, definitely.
you
That's slightly it's those woody herbs, those herbs that have, you know, they have to be a bit hardy and a bit rustic because they're also growing on a mountain.
yeah.
Um,
And then this is a very classy wine, I think. It's got that lovely length, it's got finish. We've gone up a price point, so we're now just over £15, although I'd argue that this has just as good a value as the
mm,
wines that are slightly less expensive. Value is completely relative to price point or different to price point.
yeah.
But we are up a little bit. That's reflective of the fact that this is made in smaller volumes. So this is a family producer with great heritage and history in the region. They have beautiful vineyards that they entirely control themselves. And we're talking, I was talking to the prevalence of tiny vineyards in this neck of the woods. So for a producer to have amassed enough to make it commercially viable, to make it alone in this environment is quite impressive and has taken time. So we're talking to quite a established family producer. And they're then making the wine really thoughtfully. So there's again
Mm.
some oak element here, but it's not new oak. Most of it's larger format, and it really softening the edges a little bit, but it's still allowing the grape variety to shine through.
Yeah, that's the first time that I've had Lagrein as just on its
Straight.
own,
Yes.
and it's delicious. I really enjoy it.
Really
It's got
fun.
again a bit of that sort of savoury, but obviously savoury to a red wine. It's a little bit kind of meaty to
Mm-hmm.
it. Very Moorish.
No, I think there's for me on the finish, there's also this lovely floral note that comes through again, like the sort of violets and that
Yeah,
pepperiness and the almost like wet slate, like those sort of different
yeah,
complex flavors that you sat like I say, and people think are nonsense. And but I think when people try it and I'm saying them, they can start to understand what I mean. And it's because my life is trying to describe different wines and giving them these different
yeah.
adjectives. So I get that it sounds nonsensical, but I think when you really look into the detail and if you compare it back to the Nerofino, it's got a longer finish. It's got the complexity that's coming through. Um, oh gosh, someone's having it with duck liver pate. Delicious.
That
Yeah.
sounds fantastic. That's
Because it's you're talking to those, we often pair cherries and compotes and things with duck because it's such a lovely sweet meat. But this is almost doing that from the glass of wine, but also
yeah,
I hope having the acidity to cut through the fat and
the
all
richness.
the rest and the richness. Yeah. So a lovely match. I think we could say that to so many dishes here because it's so helpful when wines have this lovely acidity and flavor because it can
Mm.
cut through fatty pork belly or it could work brilliantly with lamb or
I
um,
think as well that's like a really key um a key point or like a point of difference perhaps to um other like the more southern Italian regions when we're talking about like the food because we are in those like more northern those mountainous areas the types of food is not just going to be yes you'll have some like pasta or pasta adjacent dishes, but there's also going to be a lot of those more heartier kind of bean stews
Definitely.
and a lot more of that kind of meat
Oh,
produce.
we're
And
thinking après ski, there's lots of
yeah,
good
exactly.
cheese and fabulous pork dishes and wonderful wild game dishes. And this is yeah, no. Italian cuisine is both a victim of and a huge advocate of its success, so
Yeah,
pizza and pasta. And everyone thinks that the two are just the only food, but anyone that's traveled to Italy knows that there's just this massive, wonderful array that is held together with seams of, an importance of wheat and dough, and an importance of pasta, and importance of cheeses, and an importance of
yeah,
tomatoes. There are themes that run throughout, but no, the northern Italian food is very different to what I get to enjoy when I'm down in Sicily,
yeah,
for
yeah,
example. But as I say, this sort of individual regional pride, it has a lot to be credited with, because it's also now enabled a kind of very complex, rich map of foods and local traditions to survive,
yeah,
where in other countries they haven't.
yeah.
And we should probably taste our last wine. I realise we're sort
We
of
should.
rushing through
It's
some of the ones at the end, but
a very lovely chill hour, Sarah. This is there's some delicious wines.
but we're finishing with Pinot Nero. So of course
Yeah.
the French call it Pinot Noir, the Italians call it Pinot Nero. It's also Blauburgunder, reference on the label here, which talks to the link with Italy-German roots here.
Mm.
Again from the 2022 vintage, although the Lagrein we had just now is from the 2023. Um, Pinot Nero from the mountains is a really special thing. So we all know that Pinot is really hard to grow. It's known for having this incredibly fine skin. It's known for being susceptible to almost every problem under the sun. We know that when planted brilliantly in places like Burgundy, it can show absolute terroir down to tiny little plots and differences. So it's a little bit of the I always, because I also buy the wines from the USA for the Wine Society, I often think of Sideways and their descriptions of Pinot perhaps go over the top a little bit in that sort of iconic film. But we are talking about a grape that wine lovers love.
Mm.
And Pinot Nero, there's something special when you can find it from special sites, because it shows site. Hofstätter have special sites. So these
Yeah.
are beautiful, mountainous, clear-aired, alpine sites. This is from a single vineyard. This is also their Riserva, so this is a selection from within an already very small selection, and this is special. So I hope that any members that have bought this case open this bottle, if they haven't already tonight, but open this on a sort of a night when you want to have a real think about wines, because this will also open up in the glass. It will open up with an hour or so if you decant it. Although I'm a big fan of tasting a wine, then sticking in the decanter and drinking from the decanter all evening, because it'll just give it a bit more life. But that first glass can also be fabulous too. And the perfume changes, and something about enjoying fine wines is that we like to see the changes, or at least I like to see the changes, and to sort of go through the evening with a really delicious bottle of wine is a lovely way to spend an evening.
Absolutely.
But yes, this is one of those wines. So slightly more meditative, slightly more fine. The tannins, of course, are. I always think of Pinot Nero as having very fine and elegant tannins, as Pinot Noir often does, or is known for, but having a slightly Italian kick. So
Mm.
they're
Yeah.
slightly firmer, or they're perhaps more upright than on non-Italian Pinot Noirs. Here we've got, of course, lots of beautiful red fruit flavors coming through, but with the complexity that comes with good Pinot. So some leather flavors, some richness, some herbs.
Yeah. It's pretty, but not in a small way. It's
Mhm.
pretty and powerful, really, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
it's got that love. I mean, wearing black wasn't the ideal. I don't know if I can. It's got that lovely, lovely pale, like red color,
Yeah,
and
it looks
those
like
wild
Pinot.
strawberries, wild raspberries.
Yeah. No, it looks and smells like Pinot.
Yeah, lovely.
And then I think on the palate there are some of those slightly more mountainous, like, because I always think it's got quite a sort of mineral finish. But I know
Yeah.
where it's from. I always challenge myself that I should try and taste more of my wines blind, which of course, as buyers, that's what we're in the middle of at the
Well, you're
moment.
in the middle. Yeah.
We're currently in the middle of picking our champions for the year in our wine champions offer, which is when we blind taste more or less our entire running portfolio over 15 or 16 sessions over 3 weeks as a team. So we are tasting a lot of wines blind, and it is fascinating because we all try and play the game. We're all guessing, even privately in our notes, what we think the wines might be, especially if we think they might be ours, and trying to
Yeah.
work it out. And sometimes we're wonderfully correct, and there are some wines that don't really suit themselves. And sometimes we get it horribly wrong. But yeah, I think the moment you know where a wine is from, it's very easy to suddenly smell the associated flavors.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But if those associated flavors are delicious and you know that you're in the beautiful Dolomite mountain with this incredible blue sky and crisp weather and all the rest. I had an incredible trip out here. One of the other products that's made or grown to a particularly high standard in this neck of the woods is apples,
Oh,
orchard fruit.
yeah.
And I've been a few times to Alto Adige, and I've been lucky enough to be out there both during blossom season, which is particularly beautiful, and also when the apples are on the trees. And it's amazing. This neck of the woods is gorgeous. If you go to Bolzano and if you travel around and if sure, if you're a skier and you go in the winter and you see it all under snow, but if you go in the spring and the summer and you see it with these rich blue skies and crisp mountain air, and the hiking around there is amazing for people that love that. And there are lots of cable cars and things that are not used during the off season that those of us who are a bit lazy like me can use and get up to these beautiful alpine meadows. It's a really fantastic neck of the woods and a slightly special part of Italy because you have to sort of drive a little bit up from Verona to get there. But it's really only 2 or 3 hours up to Bolzano from Verona, or you can go up to the lake, take a bit of a
Oh,
detour. And,
yeah.
it's a wonderful place to explore. I would highly recommend to members.
Yeah. I think my experience in Dolomites is slightly less beautiful to yours. I went on a cave tour
Yeah,
and saw some
caves are great.
salamanders.
I'm a
Some
geographer at heart.
cave
That's what
boat
I
tour.
read.
But it is a beautiful part of Italy, and it's very that sort of lushness that comes with the mountainous region.
Yeah.
Do you think, Sarah, that because obviously we've seen that this is the most expensive in our lineup this evening. So this is at £36, which by comparison is expensive to what else we've tried in
Yeah.
the Reds. But considering the the prices in Burgundy, and we're seeing things like German Spätburgunder being, coming into its own slightly as a serious contender. Do you think Pinot Nero is going to be a bit of a kind of a
So,
contender for taking over some of that sort of Burgundy? Um,
So I think there's sort of two answers. So I think that if you look at Pinot Noir on a global standard and look at this one within it, I think £36 is an unbelievably fair price.
yeah,
So if you're looking at, other £35, 35 to £40 Pinot Noirs from around the world, California, New Zealand, Burgundy, Oregon, wherever, South Africa, Germany, um, this is going to be really punching fairly within that category.
mm,
If not, I would try and hope a little bit above. Um, Whether Pinot Nero from Italy will become a massive thing in the next few years is really hard to
yeah,
tell because there's just not a huge amount planted. I'm
mm,
talking to that individual price, so it makes sense for this wine to be in this neck of the woods because it's got quite a long and established history growing in Germany and France and in northern Italy under various names. So it works, but it doesn't have a long history really growing in Tuscany or in wherever. There are tiny pockets. Fontodi notably have a fantastic Pinot Nero, but it's not widely planted, and I don't
yeah,
think it will be because of the wonderful local pride winemakers have in their local
yeah,
grapes that already exist. And I would hate to see anyone pulling up, wonderful old vine Aglianico and planting something because of fashion.
yeah,
Um, so I think there's yes and no. Like
yeah,
I don't think supply of Pinot Nero is probably in a supply growth period at the moment, so it'll probably continue to grow. And we've managed to find one or two quite inexpensive Pinot Noirs, which I think offer great value from regions like the kind of slightly more lower hills and into the valleys in Veneto that can change crop more easily, and perhaps have always had a little bit more commercial acumen. But they're limited, and it's not going to be a long time. So
Mm.
I think, I think they compete. The best wines compete, and we stock 3 or 4 Pinot Neros over a year, and I really think all of them offer something interesting and unique and Italian, but also talk to this great variety and should satisfy people who love Pinot Noir from anywhere.
Mm. Yeah, it is delicious. And as Sue is saving it for the Easter weekend, the special birthday, if
Fabulous.
you can wait. But
Wow, perfect
good.
with lamb at Easter.
Yeah.
Pinot generally is great with ham at Easter, but I've been arguing that Italian reds are particularly relevant at Easter because it's such a, it's the country that homes the Pope.
But yes,
Easter is very
only fair.
important to Italians, but also the Italian tradition is to have, or broadly speaking, because traditions change across the patchwork of Italy, but lots of lamb is consumed at Easter in Italy in various forms, and the wines tend to go brilliantly, whether it's Sangiovese, Nebbiolo, or Pinot Nero, or Lagrein, because of these slightly more elevated tannins, this high acidity that is known throughout, and the lovely red fruit flavors that often accompany Italian red wines.
Yeah, perfect. That's been a fantastic tour through some of the wines and regions of Northeast Italy, Sarah. Thank you so
Mhm.
much for spending the evening with me. Thank you, members. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you've had the wines, I hope you've enjoyed tasting along with us, or if you've got them to look forward to, I hope you enjoy getting to those bottles. We do have more online events coming up, so do have a look at the website, and we hope you can join us again. But otherwise, have a lovely rest of your evening, and thanks again, Sarah. Cheers.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you, Catherine, for organising. Bye, everybody.